Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Venture Fuel Visionaries podcast. I'm your host, Fred Schonenberg. I'm so excited. Today on our show, we have Jim Lecinski. Jim is a clinical professor of marketing at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. He teaches courses on marketing strategy, omni-channel marketing distribution strategy, and generative AI for marketing. He has 30 plus years of industry experience, including a distinguished 12-year tenure at Google as the Vice President of Customer Solutions for the Americas. During his time at Google, Jim advised leading marketers on adapting their strategies to succeed in the digital landscape. I first came across Jim a while back for a book that is widely recognized and influential called Winning the Zero Moment of Truth, which highlights that pivotal moment when consumers research products online before making their purchasing decisions. His latest work is called the AI Marketing Canvas, a 5-stage roadmap to implementing artificial intelligence in marketing, which provides a practical framework for integrating AI into marketing strategies. He's currently in the final stages of completing the new and updated second edition of this, which will be ready towards the end of 2025, and has updated new sections on a few areas that I know our listeners are paying attention to: agentic, privacy and regulation, and lots of new company brand examples, which is really exciting. I had the great fortune of chatting with Jim for research on one of our clients earlier, I guess it was late last year, and he introduced me to a 2x2 framework that I seriously use almost every time I talk to a senior executive, thinking through how to think about AI and innovation. So I'm going to make Jim tell us a little bit about that in his own words. Jim was named Kellogg Professor of the Year in 2022, so I'm really looking forward to all that he can teach us today. This is going to be a great episode. Jim, welcome to the show.
Hello, Fred. Nice to be with you. Thanks for the invitation.
So I've been wanting to have you on the show since we chatted, and I was trying to figure out how long I needed to wait before I had you on, because I had like 8 million other questions for you. I'm really excited about today. That gave me a nice peek into your expertise, and I really want to dive into the new book. But maybe you could start with a little bit of your background. How did you get into marketing, Google, and eventually Kellogg? Would love to kind of know your journey in your own words.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So just the short version of that is maybe a story in 3 acts or 3 segments of my career. The first was in the advertising agency business, where I had the good fortune of working at big famous agencies like Ogilvy and Mather and Young and Rubicam and DDB, Doyle, Dane, Bernbach, on lots of great businesses and great brands, everything from Coors, well, now Miller Coors, as well as Procter & Gamble and lots of other brands on the agency side. Then part 2 of my career, because I had started to get into digital early days of search marketing, digital marketing on the agency side. Second part of my career was, as you were kind enough to mention, when I joined Google. I joined late 2005, early 2006, shortly after Google's IPO. So, my mother knew what Google was at the time. But of course, it was still a small company. I was, employee 2,000 or something like that. I guess 300,000 now. And so spent, 12, almost 13 years there, helping grow and scale the company with a lot of great, talented folks. And that's where I was first introduced to AI, to artificial intelligence. We could talk more about that. But of course, the underlying paper that introduced the transformer model, right, was introduced by Google research scientists in 2017 while I was still there. And while I was there, I started, teaching a little bit as an adjunct, what we call an adjunct professor, which means you have a full-time job and teach a course here or there. I had done a little bit of that at University of Virginia, at the Darden School of Business, at Notre Dame, and of course at Northwestern. I am a Chicago guy. And one thing led to another, and a couple of deans ago asked me if I'd be interested in joining here full time. And I was thrilled at the opportunity. I guess this is my 8th year here. But the common, I guess what we call a red thread there, Fred, is that all of those 3 acts have been, in a way, sort of advising, helping, coaching chief marketing officers to be successful, growing their brands, growing their business, growing their careers.
I love it. I feel like we could have a whole separate episode on like being the CMO whisperer, right? And how that all, what goes into that role. I think what I'd love to do is, November 2022, ChatGPT suddenly just blows the doors off of generative AI. To your point, like AI has been around for 50 years. Google is sort of leading the charge on the papers and where it was going, but it felt like all of a sudden every CMO and every executive knew about that. How did that revelation or that moment change or impact the marketing world?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right to point out that, I mean, all of this foots back to the great Alan Turing, he of the Bletchley Park Code Breakers, Can Machines Think, 1950, October 1950 journal article. And so it's weird, right? Because in the one sense, it is completely new. Everything has changed since that moment in time when ChatGPT burst onto the scene. But yet at the same time, what are we about to celebrate our 75th anniversary of artificial intelligence here and the famous Turing test and all those things that came before ChatGPT. So how did it change marketing? Well, I mean, I think there's two ways to look at this. I mean, I think one way we could say is not at all. And then what would that argument be? And your listeners might say, like, wait a minute, what do you mean not at all? Well, look, the job of marketing and marketers is to drive profitable incremental growth, both short-term and long-term for the business and the shareholders, whilst building long-term brand equity, right? And doing that in a way that sort of is respectful of our employees, the communities in which we do business, our suppliers, all right, and so on. Yeah. Well, guess what? We could have said that 75 years ago in 1950 when Alan Turing was first starting to think about AI. And we can still say that today. And if you and I are back on this podcast 30 years from now, we could still say that. So that's sort of the permanence layer as to like what marketing's job is. Yeah. And again, we could have a whole other conversation about all the folks who wrongly think marketing's job is to drive engagement or get likes, friends, fans, downloads. Like, no. But anyway, so that permanent layer remains the same. Now, the tools that we have on how to do that, the processes, the training, the people, the input, the output, all of that has continued to change, right? Because at one point there was no digital marketing. Now there is. There was no database marketing. Now there is. There was no search marketing, social marketing, video marketing, right? So these tools kind of come. This one, though, is not just another flavor in that. I think, you and I are of the same mindset, Fred, that this is a hugely more fundamental change, and the cliches abound, right? It's like fire or steam or, nuclear power or any of those kinds of cliches that are often used to compare here. But so I think, what is the more things change, the more they remain the same. We have this permanent layer, but we have a massive change happening at the same time, which is, I think, led some marketers to ignore it at their own peril because they focus on the permanent layer. And we see other marketers to throw out the permanent layer at their own peril and just focus on like chasing the latest kind of chatbot tool that I should be buying as software.
Yeah, it's crazy. We put together something that kind of sums this up, where we just looked at some talking heads, right? Some pundits in the space. And, you have at one end the people that are, the whole world has changed. Mm-hmm. Nothing will ever be the same. This is the future. Everything must go here. And others that were on the other side, that's like, this is a fad. This is like some of the other tools that have come on the radar and fallen off. Yeah. And like, the truth is both, right? Like there is that permanence. I think you described it really well, but this feels more than a tool. Right. There's so many different elements to it. I'm curious, at what point did you make that realization that this was more than just, one tool in the toolbox and something that maybe demanded that you write the book on the AI marketing canvas?
In 2017, Eric Schmidt, then CEO of, what's now Alphabet, then Google Inc., gave a keynote talk at the Cloud Next conference. And he stood up in front of the audience and in his very sort of clear, articulate way, like looked at everyone directly in the eye in the audience and said, the future of your business, no matter what business you're in, B2B, B2C, big company, small company, US, global, international, the future of your business is the combination of machine learning and big data apply to either solving the fundamental problems or seizing the opportunities in front of you. Full stop, right? And I think the gravity, the insightfulness, the forward-looking vision of that statement perhaps was maybe lost on many of the folks in the audience at that time. But, now here we are, whatever, 9 years later after that. And I say that, right? I mean, this is what you do for a living, Fred, is you work with customers, as do I, and say, combination of machine learning, AI, deep learning, right? Some sort of this new tool combined with what the computer scientists would call training data, the pre-trained data that the models already have in their AI brains, plus your zero and first party internal corporate company data. Those two things together are an immense spark or an accelerant that can really help you overcome, thorny historical monster problems in your business and or seize new opportunities that you never could have imagined before. And so that was the moment for me when I was like, this is a pretty smart guy. I think maybe we should listen to what he has to say. And that's where I started getting deeper and deeper into this area.
I love the simplicity and clarity of what he laid out, right? Like I love that you're either solving the problem, you're seizing the opportunity. By the way, it's about your data and machine learning, right? And then the human element on top of that.
Yeah.
Can you lay out, let's talk a little bit about the book, maybe what the central thesis is of the AI marketing canvas, and even if you could lay out some stages of the roadmap.
Yeah. So look, my co-author, Dr. Raj Kumar Venkatesan, who is marketing faculty at University of Virginia at the Darden School of Business, he and I have known each other for a long time. Like most professors, in addition to our full-time teaching, we also do consulting, we work with companies, we advise, et cetera. And in Raj's and my circles and travels and consulting, we heard the common theme over and over again from marketers, which is like, how do I get started? How do I understand this? What do I do first? What do I do second? Do I have to buy a company? Do I have to build our own algorithm? Should we hire like a floor full of data scientists? Like, what do we do, right? Like, how do we get started? And so, if you were to ask that question about some of the other areas of marketing, like how do I go from nothing to be a really good social marketer, social media, be a really excellent search marketer? There's roadmaps for these things, right? Like these are sort of do this first, then do this, then do that. But as it turns out then, and to some extent now, there was really no model. And so we saw brands bumping around in the dark, school of hard knocks, trial and error, some being successful, some being not so successful. So what we decided to do was a research technique, which sometimes bears fruit. It did in our case, but always sometimes doesn't, which is we did a lot of primary interviews and bench research, just looking at dozens and dozens and dozens of brands who have started down this path of implementing AI into their marketing toolkit. And we categorized by, successful, not successful, jury's out somewhere in between. And we then coded or categorized what it was that they were doing. And then, this research technique, you look at the sort of the winners versus the strugglers and try and look at what is the difference between what those two pools are doing. And it was actually very, very striking is that those who were succeeding with AI in marketing all had a common pattern. And that's the 5 steps of the canvas, right? So step 1 really quickly is they all had first party, zero party training data that they were using. And by the way, none of them were sort of letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. They weren't waiting for the 7-year data lake transformation project to come to fruition to have perfect data. They were like, you know what? We got some customer data on this business unit in this country. Let's see what we can do with it. The second step then was not to build your own models, but to actually experiment with your vendor partners' existing models. So, HubSpot, MailChimp, Google, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, right? They all have built AI solutions into their tools. So your first party data plus their tools at the second stage to just start experimenting. Hey, let's take 10% of our budget and see if, an AI powered advertising solution, now called Advantage Plus on Facebook, for example, or Performance Max on Google, how does that do versus the manual non-AI old school way? You start to catalog the old way versus new way. At that point, you typically name an AI marketing champion in your marketing department, someone whose job is to look across all these experiments, help train your staff, bring in experts, have book of the month club, all this kind of stuff. Then the third level is you start to make some bigger bets where you want to in-house or in-source this. Fred, you and I remember the old days when everybody outsourced the building and hosting of their website to their ad agency, right?
Oh
Well,
yeah.
nobody does that anymore, right? It's a strategic advantage. You now own it and insource it. And that's what happens at step 3. And you start to place some big bets. And then at step 4, now you're starting to fully transition to be an AI first marketing organization. And now and only now do we start to talk about like build, buy, or partner. You can go to your CFO, ask for some CapEx or some OpEx because you have evidence that the new way is higher ROI than the old way. And then at step 5, just a very few companies might actually cross that chasm where they can then take what they have built internally for AI tools for themselves and then sell it externally as a new revenue stream. Not everybody's going to do that, but that's sort of the 5th and top level of the canvas. And so following that pattern is the central thesis of the book. That's the best practice. You don't have to make it up as you go. You don't have to bump along in the dark. Company after company benefits from this pattern, and that's what we unpack in the book.
I love it. I might double click into some of the stages. I did want to touch on Raj very quickly, your co-author, because of his background. Some of the areas of focus for him were around ethical and system level perspective. Can you talk about why that was a good collaboration as a co-author?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to the fact that we, knew each other for many years and respected each other and got along well, which is of course always important, chemistry in a co-author situation, it was also a very nice kind of yin and yang, right? I am a practitioner, an industry-focused guy. He is a academic. He has PhD. He's a computer scientist. I am not. So he brings sort of that technical area, and among his academic research and his focus areas is about trust, privacy, ethics, reliability, right? Those kinds of things. And so while we shared some interests and shared some overlap in our expertise, it was actually a very nice yin and yang, or maybe you say Venn diagram, where while we shared some things, he brought in a whole lot, I brought in a whole lot, and together that allowed us to kind of look at the big picture here for marketers.
I love it. So back to the stages. One of the things, as we talked very much at the beginning, that some parts of marketing have not changed at all, right? So in digital marketing, for years, we've had consumer data, behavior, insights, tracking. How is AI different, or how is it accelerating or transforming maybe what was there 2-3 years ago?
Yeah, so if you look at this as AI, I will oversimplify for the sake of our discussion here, the time we have at hand, but it can predict and it can generate. Let's just sort of at the most essential level. So again, we're not here to endorse particular platforms or particular products, but let's just take HubSpot as an example. If you're a small business, not HubSpot, MailChimp. If you're a small business, email is a major way that you both communicate with your existing customers, as well as try to get people to sign on to your list and get them to convert for the first time. And you look at customer acquisition cost, purchase frequency, all those kinds of things. All right, so you and I are running a small business. What are the key questions? Like, okay, what should the subject line be in the email? When should we send it? On Sunday night or Monday morning, right? What should the offer be? What should the creative look like? So, while we had some predictive analytics tools, some regression tools, there were ways that we could have, applied data to that answer. Here now, even a small business can, rely on some of the built-in AI that, for example, MailChimp, but again, most of these providers are now offering, whereby we can set what is our goal. Is it new customers? Is it conversion? Is it raising average order value? Is it website traffic? We set a conversion goal, and then its AI will now make some predictions as to the best time to drop it in your inbox, Fred, versus mine, based on your individual past behavior and interaction with my company's emails, but also how you've interacted with all of the other emails that have been sent by MailChimp into your inbox, right? So now you take even a small business like that sort of AI brain, that tremendous power. This is Eric Schmidt's, right? Like your data plus AI, right, equals new opportunities. So this is not just sort of a Fortune 500, expensive, custom, big company thing. Up and down the spectrum of firms can take advantage of it. And this is, not just, better predictive analytics out of a regression model in Excel. This is like a whole leap forward from that.
I love that. And I'd love to, and I think this creeps a little bit into your second edition coming out. But there's two things you talked about as we chatted about the new edition that jumped for me. One is agentic. And man, is that the hot phrase at the moment. Like a year ago, all I heard about was AI, Gen AI from every executive I talked to. Now they're like, and we want it to be agentic. And I'm like, do you know what that means? And so I love what is making agentic so interesting to people, and how will that play in your new edition?
Yeah, I mean, we've added a large section on agentic, and different people have different definitions on this. Again, we'll essentialize that for our purposes here as saying an AI-powered system that has the ability not just to either predict or generate, but then in some autonomous or semi-autonomous way, the ability to take some action based on that prediction or generation, right? So, it is the hot thing. It is sort of the buzzword. I'm sure, Fred, you're like me. Clients, consulting clients, advisory clients who say like, we haven't done really much at all, but could we please be agentic by next quarter? Well, there's the old crawl, walk, run, right? Like there's some things you got to put in place before you can get to that. But it is smart for businesses to be looking at what this is. There's a number of, again, we're not here to advertise other platforms, but there's a number of, solutions already out there that just regular consumers can look at. If you start to say, let's use the term agentic as in agent, as in a real estate agent or a realtor, I might say to a human agent, hey, I want to relocate to, I don't know, Los Angeles or San Diego or Houston, Texas. And I'm looking for a 4, but ideally 5-bedroom house. It's hot there, so I'd like a pool. I'd like it to be in a neighborhood with, a reputable school district, whatever my criteria are, right? Yeah. So you and me as a human can go into any of these real estate sites and we start clicking boxes, right? Like check, check, check. We put in parameters, et cetera. On the other hand, right, there are now plugins, there are agents where I could just like literally speak that set of criteria to an agent. It will now automatically go out and look at all those real estate sites and dump a short list into my inbox, into my Slack channel, right, into my chat of here's 5 houses that I found for you. Really kind of cool stuff, right? And so, what I think the promise of this is that it stands to benefit both users, consumers, buyers, as well as brands. And so now we face the sort of scary future scenario where my agentic bot is going to be interacting with a brand's agentic bot, and we have bot-to-bot communications and decisions happening. And by the way, that's not like Star Wars, Star Trek, sci-fi stuff. We're about there.
Yeah, what's crazy is I talked about this bot-to-bot selling and what that means for large brands or retailers or individuals 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And it felt far away. And now does it not feel far away? It is coming. So let me flip to the other side of that coin, which is privacy and regulation. And I will say that every big company is super excited about this in so many different ways. And then immediately here comes IT, privacy, cybersecurity, and legal. And we're 18 months before we're out there, and the world has changed and it's moving so fast. I know that's an area you're focusing on. So I'm curious your thoughts on how that is evolving and how you would advise somebody knowing that sort of muck is necessary, right? But it can slow down the progress of somebody trying to get in front of all this.
Yeah. So, look, and we've all heard all the brand horror stories on this all the way back to 2 years ago when the Samsung engineers were putting code into free public ChatGPT and it leaked later, when Air Canada puts a customer service chatbot out there and it starts making up fair rules. Judge in Canada says, well, it's your bot. You got to live by what it told the customers. And then, more recently, we heard the story out of the UK where unfortunately there was a deep fake that had cloned the CFO's voice. They convened a conference call and were able to then, because it sounded like the CFO, I guess it was the controller, transferred 25 million pounds at what they thought was the direct request of a deep fake voice clone CFO. So, we've all heard these kind of horror stories out there. Yeah, and they're real, right? So this is not just like, scare tactics. They are real. So, I mean, look, how do I advise on this? First of all, I say, like, look, there's a couple of risks that you just need to be aware of, starting with even just accuracy risks. Everybody's like, these things hallucinate, they make stuff up. Yes, but by the way, so do humans, right? I mean, I've called customer service humans who've told me things that actually are not policy. But that aside, I think we could probably both agree that with each iteration, these models are getting more and more accurate. And I mean, not that we have a zero hallucination problem, but it's not the hallucination problem we had 3 years ago.
Right.
But that's still an issue, right? Like, does it even tell me the right stuff? The second then is a legal copyright ownership IP problem. Country by country, jurisdiction by jurisdiction. Italy has a different thought on this than Japan, but we're both speaking here in the US. And so, we have an input and an output legal issue. The input is, if my company, my brand, uses any tool from Adobe or OpenAI or whoever it is, the underlying training data, and we found out, by the way, it looks like, Meta's Llama was trained on copyrighted books, including my book. Okay. Well, then if your brand uses that LLM to generate something, am I liable, right, for a legal action by, Sarah Silverman famously led one of these class action lawsuits because her book was training data in there. So this is reason cause for pause. Now, again, if you're a big company or medium company and you're using the enterprise grade version of these, not the public individual version, but like if you're using paid Adobe Firefly for enterprise, Adobe will indemnify you against that. And many chief legal counsels take comfort in saying that's fine. But then on the output side, so suppose we do use it to generate text or image or video, U.S. Patent and Trade Office has ruled that if it's entirely AI generated, cannot be copyrighted. This goes back to the famous issue where the woman was at the zoo and the monkey took her camera and took a selfie, and government said, no, that was not human generated image. That was a monkey generated image. You can't copyright that. Okay. So now it's machines. But they have said if it's substantially humanly created or has substantial human input, then it can be, but it's not yet been tested in US courts as to what exactly substantial means. Yeah. I might point out, by the way, and I've had this conversation, as I'm sure you have, Fred, with quite a few chief legal counsels, is it really that important for you to copyright that image? If I'm going to send one email once to 100,000 customers and I've got like a lifestyle image of, I don't know, woman in a flower shop at sunset, right, do I need to actually copyright that image? Right? Yeah. I don't know. So, but that's sort of your second set of issues that you really need to think about. Of course, then we get into bigger issues like process reengineering, workflow, team issues, training issues. And then, of course, you get into the bigger societal issues like trust, deep fakes, elections, all those kinds of things. So yeah, you need to be kind of aware of all of those. But just to wrap that question up for you, Fred, one way that you can start is by looking at AI internally, not even externally yet. What can it do behind your firewall where we don't have some of those external risks?
Yeah, I love it. So, Jim, I knew that the hardest thing was going to be to keep this within time. Yeah, I have a couple different questions at the end here, but what I would really love is maybe if we could summarize what is one thing you want your readers to take away from reading the book?
I would say this is not optional, and you can do it. Right? I mean. Yes, it's hard. Yes, none of us were computer science masters or PhD students. Like, that's not how we grew up in our marketing careers. But then again, we didn't grow up as search experts or video experts or digital experts. Right? We learned all that stuff. Part of being a great marketer is the growth mindset and the adaptability. You can do it with the proper roadmap, right? And the proper guidance. So, the first thing that's involved is you got to dig in. Remember, like when we all saw Facebook the first time, you and I, Fred, were at a conference and we saw a PowerPoint presentation about Facebook. Well, that's one thing, but then you got to put it on your phone, right? So like, don't just listen if you're a marketer, senior or junior, like give yourself a KPI to use like 5 AI interactions in your own personal life a week, right? Like just go use these things. Don't just watch podcasts, although we want you to watch this podcast, but don't just watch podcasts. Yeah, right. Like go do it.
I wonder how many people are actually just using AI to summarize our podcast conversation, because why not?
There you go.
What are you most excited about? One of the things I always talk about, like our catchphrase at Venture Fuel, is what's next is now, right? This idea that, hey, it's all happening so fast. The future is coming at us. What are you excited about that you think is next?
Yeah, look, what I'm most excited about is we're starting to enter the phase where there's a realization, a growing or broad realization, that these AI tools aren't just cost-saving, productivity, efficiency, headcount cutting tools. Like that's where everybody rushed at the beginning. You know, marketers are constantly told by their CFOs, do more with less, right? Yeah. So it's like, oh, well, if I have this, write the first draft of my creative brief, then maybe I don't need so many people writing creative briefs. Okay, well, sure, I guess. Hey, if I have it summarizing the meeting minutes, maybe I don't need humans to spend time summarizing the meeting minutes. But that's, you know, like just doing the same old thing. That's the faster horse, right? If we use that cliche. But these tools are capable of so much more. And just like, you know, a quick example I love to point people to is IKEA, right? The global Swedish furniture retailer. Their dream would have been years ago to for free give every single IKEA customer or IKEA prospect a licensed interior designer at their disposal for free to help them create their dream room. But guess what? There's not enough licensed interior designers in the world. And even if there were, that wouldn't be economically affordable by IKEA. Okay. But guess what they've done? They've basically created a customized interior designer, chatbot, co-pilot partner. It's not a human, it's artificial, right? Using AI, but that's not just cost saving. That's not the same old stuff that IKEA was doing it faster and saving a nickel. This is transformational new stuff. And I think, Fred, we're on the cusp of people starting to realize it's capable of all kinds of unimaginable things, right? That we're now, right? Imagination takes time. Cost cutting is everybody's first reaction.
Yeah, I love it. It's such a good combination, right? And it goes back, and I gave you some credit on the 2x2 at the beginning. So I would say, like, I love the idea was, is this internal or external? And is it for efficiency or growth? And I think if you look at that, like that's such a clarifying way to think about where do you start, right? Internal efficiency, and what is the big potential? And then that's the external growth and takes the imagination. So I love this. Jim, obviously I would like to talk for about 3 more hours with you. Where do you want people to go to learn more about the book, to follow you, to where would you have people go that are as thirsty as I am for more Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Fred. I would just say follow me on LinkedIn. Jim Lecinski is my handle. I post lots of interesting information, my own thoughts, as well as some others. Book updates are there and everything else. So please follow me on LinkedIn and lots more good information to follow.
I love it. Well, thank you for all you're doing to spark change and for your time today. I really enjoyed it.
My pleasure.